I'm a lazy teenager who don't really have a life other than going on the internet to find something interesting to do. I got the great idea of going to an abandoned house all alone because I thought if I recorded the experience and showed my friends, it would make me cool. I searched up many houses, but one stood out to me the most. A big mansion that was left behind after a massive shootout happened in there. Apparently, a man who lived there with his wife and 3 kids went crazy after he caught his wife cheating. He shot up the whole place and killed all 3 children while doing so. I didn't really believe in haunted houses, and I wasn't really scared of anything, so my idiot self decided to take a look. The house was about 30 minutes away from my house on foot, so if something happened to me, I couldn't run home fast or to a neighbor. The house was in the middle of nowhere, so that made it even more dangerous, and most likely to have creeps living inside of there. I didn't think about all that and came with nothing but a flashlight. The moment I entered the house, a part of the roof came falling down right in front of me. That should have been my cue to leave, but I wanted to do this so bad. I wanted to be cool. So I stepped over the fallen roof and made my way inside. I heard weird scratching sounds everywhere, but I didn't think much of it. Really, it could be a bird or a mouse finding a place to call home. The amount of bullet holes in the wall were crazy. This guy really wanted his family dead. After some exploring, I smelled a rotten smell coming from the bedroom. Dumb me wanted to check it out, and what I found in there was probably the most gruesome thing I have ever seen. 3 young kids dressed like they came from the 1800s were laying dead with their skulls shot open. I couldn't move. I couldn't believe what I just witnessed. These kids, what happened to them? I blacked out, and before I knew it, I was in the mansion, but it wasn't abandoned anymore. It was back to normal? How long have I been out for? Where was I? What time was it? I was freaking out as I saw a woman run up to the perfectly made bedroom with 3 kids. The 3 kids I saw before I blacked out. I yelled out to her from where I was standing. She couldn't see or hear me. Then shots were fired and the woman screamed, her kids all hiding under the bed. The man ran upstairs to the bedroom and shot the woman the moment she tried to stop him. After he shot her, silence overtook the room. I wondered if he knew I was there. Should I say something? I was standing right next to her body. Did he not see me? Then I heard a small cry coming from under the bed. The man with all his force flipped over the bed and shot the kids. I tried to stop him, but my hands passed right through him. He turned to me. I was scared. Could he see me? He laughed at me. I asked him, "What's so funny?" He just kept laughing and reloaded his gun. I now think I shit myself. The man pointed the gun at my head, and the moment he shot me is the moment I woke up. I woke up in the hospital. What? A few moments ago, I was in the house. What happened? Frantically, I tried to get out of the bed, but an IV bag was attached to me. I couldn't go. A doctor came up to me and said I was lucky. Apparently, before I saw the bodies, I yelled my lungs out and some hiker heard me. He ran in and saw me hiding under the bed, yelling and crying. I passed out when he called the cops. I asked the doctors about the children, and the doctors looked confused. "What kids?" the doctor asked. "The kids, the 3 dead kids laying there." The doctor walled out of the room, leaving me confused. He came back with drug tests. Apparently, I was high on some sort of deadly gas that still roamed inside of the bedroom of the house. The doctor said there is no curing my lungs, and that I only have 3 months left to live. I don't care, to be honest. I did what I had to do. I finally did something with my life before it ended. My best Carl and I used to be into exploring abandoned buildings, and during one of our explorations, I experienced the most chilling experience of my life. The area we live in has a lot of abandoned buildings. Most of them are old factories that have been empty and decaying all my life. We had broken into several of them, and we were looking for something new. There are only so many old, broken-down assembly lines and corroded tools you can see before it gets boring and extremely monotonous. And mostly, it was not ever creepy or scary. Halloween was coming around that year, and we really wanted to do something scary. That was when Carl came to me and told me that he had found the perfect option for us. His aunt had worked as a nurse in a psychiatric hospital when she was very young. It had been closed down for several decades. The only reason that Carl and I had never heard about it was that it was nearly impossible to get to. You would have to travel through a very heavily forested area to get to it. There were roads, but they had been grown over. I guess that when the hospital had first opened, it was also used to treat communicable diseases, so that is why it wasn't built in town. A lot of old hospitals like that were built in areas away from towns. Well, there was no way I was passing this opportunity up. So Carl packed up a few things about a week and a half before Halloween, and we set out to the forest. His aunt gave him rough directions as to where the place was. Part of me wondered if she was playing an elaborate prank on us and that there really wasn't a hospital out there. It was quite a trek before we found evidence of a road that had been grown over. However, we were both excited when we did. We followed the road until we got to the hospital. We were quite shocked when we did. The place was huge. We were surprised that such a large building had been sitting there in the middle of that forest, forgotten for who knows how long. Since there were no roads that were not overgrown, there was no caretaker there. Parts of the lawn were quite overgrown too, but other parts were simply dead. It was fairly easy for us to find our way up to the building. It was also easy to find a way to get in as it wasn't boarded up in any way. So we found a broken window and slipped in. Now, although we were looking for a creepy time, we weren't completely stupid, just moderately so. So our little adventure was taking place during the day, not during the evening. Even so, we still needed flashlights in order to look around. We split up because we actually thought we'd have to in order to explore the entire place before it got dark. We didn't have cell phones, not that it probably would have mattered at the time. We were pretty much in the middle of nowhere, and I figured that even if we had them, we wouldn't have a signal. We did, however, have a set of walkie-talkies to communicate with each other. That way, in case someone found something really interesting, he would be able to contact the other quickly. So we split up. And for a while, it was pretty interesting, if not eventful. There was all sort of old equipment, wheelchairs, and tons of things that I couldn't even explain what they were. And yeah, some of it was pretty creepy, but nothing really that I wanted to tell Carl to run across the hospital to check out. And that's when I heard it. A male human scream. A loud male human scream. The first thing I did was freeze before I heard it again. And then I thought about Carl and got really concerned. However, before I could even pick up my walkie-talkie to contact him, he contacted me. And his question scared the crap out of me. "Are you?" Carl asked, worry in his voice. "Why are you screaming, man?" I was too shocked to answer at first. However, when he asked me again what was wrong, I had to let him know that I thought it was him that was screaming. I heard the scream again. It was coming from the direction that Carl had gone off in, but that wasn't extremely telling. However, I guessed whoever was screaming must have been somewhere in between us. We agreed to meet up, and we were able to do so rather quickly. In that time period, I heard the screaming a couple more times. We were concerned, but both agreed that we would try to find the source of the screaming. It was surprising that someone else could be in the hospital, but as far as we knew, some serial killer had someone trapped in a basement or something. We were not huge guys by any stretch of the mind, but Carl had brought a gun with him just in case we would need some sort of protection. The screaming was not constant, and it was really hard to get a read on where it was coming from. The only thing that both Carl and I knew for sure was that it was coming from the basement floor. We needed a flashlight when we went to explore that part of the hospital. It was completely underground and there were no lights. None of the rooms on the bottom floor had locked doors on them, so we were absolutely able to explore them with our flashlight. However, when we were down there, we didn't the screaming at all. It wasn't until we went through dozens of darkened rooms and found absolutely nothing that could account for a scream that we ascended the stairs back to the ground floor. By the time we made it back up the stairs, it had been a while since we had heard the scream. And in fact, we didn't hear it again while we were in the hospital. We really searched the entire hospital. We remained there after dark, convinced that it was more important to possibly try and help someone than it was to worry about walking home in the dark. but we searched to no avail and eventually had to leave the hospital. We made our way home through the dark in the woods. The entire time we were really scared by our recent experience. We were nervous and felt we were being watched the entire time. Also, we were concerned about whomever we had heard screaming in that hospital. We couldn't do much other than enter an anonymous report with the police. The more we talked about it, the more it seemed odd that someone would have been there when we were and needing help. We began wondering if perhaps the screaming was something to simply scare us out of the building. Who knows? I know we never will. In the area that I grew up in, there was a story about an old abandoned psychiatric hospital that supposedly housed some of the craziest people around. There were various stories about the place, most which were probably not true. But the most consistent one was that the place was closed down for malpractices. It was supposedly closed down in the 1960s. The hospital was built way out of town in a rural setting. I always thought this was because they wanted to keep dangerous people away. But I have since learned that mentally ill people are not mostly dangerous. I mean, some definitely are, but I don't believe most are. I guess that maybe the country setting was to make it more tranquil for the patients. Well, my friend Eric and I had often talked about wanting to go out and try to find the old hospital. We supposed that it might be haunted, and that would make it a lot more fun to try and explore. However, it was something that we talked about more than we actually went about doing. But finally, when we were both 16 years old, we decided to go out and actually try and find this place. Other teenagers had told us before that they had gone out there and had smoking and drinking parties. They even told us where to find it in case we ever wanted to go out and see it. The forests around the area that we lived in were pretty dense, but that didn't stop Eric and I from trying to make it through them. We eventually came across a barbed wire fence with no trespassing signs on it. The other guys told us that indicated that we had reached the property that the hospital was on. So we knew that we were getting close. It didn't take too long before we found the place, and it was pretty impressive when it did. The building was huge and definitely showed its age. But what surprised me the most was that all the windows seemed intact. I always pictured abandoned buildings with them all broken. We needed to find a way to get in, though. To cover as much area as possible, we decided to go in opposite directions, looking for doors or broken windows. We didn't want to break anything ourselves, because if we got caught, that would have just put us into even more trouble. I went to the back of the building, and Eric went toward the front. We told each other that we would meet up on the other end of the building. I never made it to the other end of the building, however. After walking for a while on the back of the building, I came across something unexpected. I guess at a back entrance to the building, there was a van there. A couple men were by the van and looked like they were moving something. 2 other men showed up, carrying something which they put in the back of the van. I didn't want to get caught, so I quickly went back in the direction that I had come from. I realized that I would have to try to catch up with Eric rather than meet him at the end of the hospital. So I made it around to the starting point and then started walking along the front of the building. There was no sign of Eric as I walked along the front of the building. My guess was that he had already made it to the other end. So I just kept walking until I got over there. Imagine my surprise when Eric wasn't there either. I crept around to the back side of the building and peered around. It looked like the men there had finished loading their van and were about to be on their way. Fortunately for me, they drove off in the opposite direction. I had really been scared of getting caught. I felt safe, but I had to wonder where Eric was. This was the spot that we were supposed to have met up in, but he was nowhere to be seen. I looked around for him, thinking that he was looking for me, but I couldn't find him. I wondered if he had gotten into the hospital, but I couldn't figure out how he might have. The men who I came across locked up the entrance that they had been using. Plus, I couldn't find any other way to get into the building. After looking for him for a while, I figured I should probably wait in one space. If he was also searching for me, then maybe constantly moving would have kept him from finding me. However, I waited a long time and he never showed up. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to leave the area without my best friend. Also, I thought that he might have been in danger. But hours went by and he never showed up. Finally, I decided the best thing to do was go home and maybe get the police involved. The police looked in the area but were unable to find Eric either. I was worried that I would never see my best friend again. About 2 days after this happened, though, Eric did make it home. But whenever he was asked what had happened, he claimed he simply got lost in the woods. But I never believed that. Other than exploring the woods, he never talked about anything else. He never explained why he had left the hospital area to go back to the woods. He denied ever seeing the men that I had seen with the van. But when I brought it up, there was a look in his eyes that told me that he knew more than he was telling me. He had seen them and possibly interacted with him. I could tell by how scared he was when we talked about it. He never told me anything, though, other than I got lost in the woods.